Today I'm going to share 3 tips with you guys to help you get better at sampling. Alright, so let's take a listen to the sample that I found. You guys know the policy. When most people start to try to sample, they think of sampling in terms of time, meaning they'll chop different parts of the sample and try to rearrange the timing of those chops. So what you might do is throw this into a sampler and try to play around with the timing of each of these chops to try to come up with your own arrangement. But to take your sampling skills even further, thinking about your sample not only in terms of its timing, but also in terms of its space can be far more effective. Not only the stereo space, but more importantly, the frequency space. So again, let's take a listen to this sample. Now to me, this is a great sample, not only because the instrumentation sounds good to me, but because the instruments inside of the sample take up very particular spaces in the frequency spectrum. You guys can see if I throw an EQ on top of the sample and try to isolate different frequency zones, using an EQ, we can easily isolate different instruments inside of the sample and try to rearrange them individually, as opposed to just rearranging the sample as a whole. For example, let's say I isolated the pluck strings in the lower frequency spectrum right here, and I use this as one layer in my loop. And now I duplicate the sample out by pressing Alt and C on the channel rack. By the way, I'm using Momentum here, which is a free sampler, which I just happen to like more than Slice X or Fruity Slicer, in case you're wondering. So I'm going to take this duplicated layer here and just send it to its own mixer insert. So for this layer, I isolated an entirely different space in the frequency spectrum. And I was able to isolate these bell chops here and come up with an entirely different pattern with its own unique timing, completely separate from my first layer. And what's great is I can add an entirely different set of creative effects on top of these different layers separately. So for the first layer, you guys remember I isolated a lower frequency spectrum over here. And afterwards I added some saturation, a little bit more EQing, as well as some compression. Whereas for the bells, where I had this unique space here, I added a unique delay as well as some harmonization effects and some tape saturation to go along with some chorus as well. So after all that, this is how it sounds. And I can even do this again. Here I found some strings later on in a different section of the sample, and I came up with this additional layer here. And what I did with this layer was I automated the volume to play at specific times. And this is why sample malleability is key. This is something that I say a lot in my sampling videos. Choosing samples that allow for the most amount of manipulation will allow you to do so much more with your samples. Whereas choosing a sample that has a lot going on in it, like it has drums playing on top as well as a singer and a ton of instrumentation, it's just going to be a lot harder to try to manipulate and change the sample. Now this type of openness with my sample is just going to allow me to do a lot more to help improve the beat. For example, let's say I find a sound in the sample that I really like. Now after looking through the entire sample, I can't find this instrument playing anywhere else. We literally just have this one note here. But if I want to use this sound to create my own melodic pattern like I did with those bells earlier on, I can use this trick here. The first thing you're going to do is route this to a mixer insert. And you can try your best to try to isolate the sound as best you can with some EQing. You can also throw some creative effects on top as well if you'd like. And what you're going to do is right click on top of the meter here and click Open Audio Logger. And now all you're going to do is hit play. And now I have a recording of this one unique note. And at this point I can just use this function here, the drag copy sample selection, and drag it into my channel rack. And I'll make sure to mute Edison here just to make sure that doesn't play again. And at this point I can just play the sample like an instrument by going into the piano roll. So after using some more effects to clean up the sound, here's what I came up with. And again, this would be near impossible if I chose a sample that just had a lot going on in it, and this is why choosing the right sample is so important. And the last thing I want to show you guys, let's say you get to the point where you've added other elements into your beat like the drums, and you get to the point where you want to add a bass line or other melodic instruments on top. This is something that I showed you guys in an older video, but it's really helpful, so it's worth repeating. If you want to more easily see what the notes are that are playing inside of your sample, what you can do is use Wave Candy, which comes with FL Studio. This thing can show you the different notes that are playing inside of your sample. I did a full tutorial video on how to use this thing, so check it out right above my head. Now looking at this readout, it looks like my sample here contains an E, as well as a B and a C. So if I'm trying to come up with an 808 pattern, I can easily use this to let me know which notes I should be using. And there you go, I was easily able to use Wave County to help me build a framework for my 808 pattern. And by the way, if this is something that you guys struggle with, I did a full video on how to come up with 808 patterns right above my head, so check that out. If you guys have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section below if these are the types of techniques you already do when you're sampling. My free drum kit is available in the description box below, as well as a link to the Discord if you're interested in having your beats reviewed live, and I'll see you guys next time.